Hi guys, how's it going? We're going to be doing a couple of budget decks today. I'm going to change up the format a little bit. I had some people tell me that I maybe went through things a little bit too quickly, that new players might not necessarily know what every card is. So we are going to slow it down a little bit and try to include more gameplay so you can see the decks in action. That being said, we are actually going to do two today, so this is going to be a little bit of a longer video because I want to get these three colors out of the way so I can start looking at some of the other stuff that I'm interested in trying. Specifically, Control Scout is one I really want to try to make a budget version, and other control decks. There's control decks I think are possible in budget, but it's very difficult with three colors. So in the past, the rules I used were you had to have the Skyrim precons because I thought they were the best purchase. I still believe that, but we're not going to use the Skyrim precons today. I'll let you know why in just a second. The only thing we're going to be using is commons, rares, and story cards, as well as the precon decks for the houses themselves. So the Tribunal precon deck, you need it basically just for Archcanon Sarioni, and then for the Hlaalu deck, you will need the Hlaalu precon. The reason we're doing that is because we're actually going to be using Divine Fervors today. So instead of saying you need the Skyrim precons for this, the prerequisite I will do is you do need to craft 2 Divine Fervors for both of the decks today. You get 1 for free from the story, but you will need to craft the other 2. I think both of these archetypes are very difficult to pull off without Divine Fervor, significantly worse without Divine Fervor, and I think Divine Fervor is one of the safest crafts. It's been used in essentially every single archetype. It's been used in combo, it's been used in aggro, mid-range, even in control in the past, so I think it's one of the best cards to craft, and I think you can build a lot of budget decks around just 3 Divine Fervors and then filling out the rest with good cards. So that's what we're going to do today. We are going to be playing Midrange Tribunal to start off with. So we're going to be doing this as a pretty standard curve deck. We did Redoran and Dagoth in the past, which were also kind of standard curve decks, so we won't go too much into that. We have our 2 drops here. We have Dragontail Savior, Warclaw, Wardcrafter, and Windkeep Spellsword. Crown Quartermaster is just for filling out curves. We have a lot of interaction. That's one of the big differences between Tribunal and the other mid-range decks, is there is a lot of interaction in the forms of stuff like Firebolt, Sorcerer's Negation, Lightning Bolt, Edict of Azura, Piercing Javelin. There's actual removal in this deck, so that can be something that's quite useful in potentially winning the races, because you are going to have these curve creatures. We do have quite a bit of them. We're very stacked in terms of what curve creatures we have available to us, but sometimes you can't fully keep a board, especially in budget. One of the big things we're missing here is something like a Cloudburst Illusionist that allows you to change field lane advantage into a win. Stuff like Javelin and Edict can sort of replicate that effect, although without the body, and just have other uses as well. One of the big differences between this and a normal list is the lack of finishers. It's really difficult to find finishers for a mid-range list when you're looking at budget options. So the stuff we're going to be looking at is stuff that generally isn't seen a lot on ladder, which is Black Room Necromancer and Golden Saint. We also have White Room Protector. It's a little bit of a finisher, but it's mostly just a really solid card in this list. So these require a health advantage. That means we're going to be using a lot of things that try to keep that health advantage as we go through the game. Stuff like Shrieking Harpy and Aldvalat the Assassin are really early defensive plays. Aldvalat is also an offensive play, just a crazy good card. And we have stuff like Feasting Hunger and Archcanon Sarioni even to try and keep a health advantage. Knight of Nesis, Koala Keeper, these are sort of defensive 3s. Endoro Mastermind to potentially try and filter out some of this stuff depending on situation, because this does try to fit a lot of different archetypes. But we use that to try to keep a health advantage for the Royal Sage, Black Room Necromancer, and Golden Saint, because these are essentially our finishers. It's weird to say Royal Sage is a finisher at 4, but this is sort of a blowout if you've already swelled the board. You need to try to figure out a way to turn the early board advantage, which I think it should be reasonable to get with this deck pretty frequently, into a win, and those are our ways to do that. So we've actually covered a mid-range deck on this series before, but we didn't really talk too much about what mid-range archetype is, what that means. If you're unfamiliar with the term, mid-range is one of 3, I would say, major archetypes, although there's other ones. The others being aggro and control, mid-range being the one kind of sandwiched in the middle. The easiest way I can give you guys to kind of know what is mid-range is based on kill turn. So a mid-range deck can kill earlier and can kill later, but aims to end the game somewhere between turn 7 to 11. Control is turn 12 and later. You could say mid-range is actually even faster than turn 11 if you want. And then aggro is before turn 7 is the goal. But this can be represented in a lot of different forms. For example, something like Warrior, which is considered mid-range, has a curve topping out at 5, where there's something like Mid-Battle Mage, which runs like 1-2 drop and tops out its curve at 8. And those are both sort of considered mid-range. So it's a very versatile archetype. It's a very loose term. It's just kind of something that isn't aggro and isn't control. In this sense, it's a lot closer to aggro. We are a lot closer to an aggro deck. We're just an aggro deck that has a little bit more interaction. We're an aggro deck that cares a little bit more about trading, and we're an aggro deck that can go a little bit slower but still put pressure on. We don't have to have amazing early turns. Obviously, it's fantastic to hit that 3-drop, hit that 4-drop, you know, that kind of stuff in a mid-range deck, but it's not something you necessarily need. It's something you can maybe make your way back through with smart trading and with hitting the right cards at the right time. So mid-range is basically just something that is supposed to be relatively versatile. It's a lot faster than control. It doesn't want the game to last forever. It wants to enact its own game plan and be proactive, but it doesn't have to just rush face and do absolutely nothing else. So this is probably the deck which most is impacted by the fact that it's budget, as you can kind of see based on the amount of cards that we would use if we had access to them. Barrow Stalker is, I think, one of the more important ones. Well, the most important one is Cloud Resolution, so we'll get to it. But Barrow Stalker, one of the more important ones because it's a really, really strong 2-drop that really helps with the sort of health advantage game plan. Onde Clan and Daggerfall are really solid 3s. Dark Guardian, a good defensive option. Ignore Sarion, it's just in here, so I could do 3 colors. Bleak Coast Troll is insane. It's an auto-include as soon as you have access to Forgotten Hero. Corrupted Shade a little bit less, Emperor's Bait a little bit less. Iron and Emmerich are amazing. Filling out the Last Shadow Defense Priest is always good. And then these are our finishers that we don't have access to. The Bone Colossus, Clockwork Apostle, and Donkano. Just a little bit more consistent than the health gain effects, although they are a little bit less swingy. You definitely want to be replacing those Necromancers and Golden Saints with these cards as soon as you have access to them. The biggest one is Cloud Rest Illusionist. In terms of finding ways to swing a board advantage into a win, Cloud Rest Illusionist is that card that turns a 1 field lane into a 1 game. This is one of the most important cards in the game for yellow mid-range archetypes, so this is another one I would very much suggest that you would craft as soon as you can. So the next archetype we're going to look at is going to be Hlaalu tokens. Now, there's a lot of Hlaalu aggro, but I think Hlaalu aggro is very reliant on Haunted Manor, where Hlaalu tokens is significantly less so. You can build Hlaalu tokens without Haunted Manors, but with Fervor. I don't think you can build Hlaalu aggro with Fervor, but without Haunted Manors. So that's why we're going in this direction, just because Fervor, I think, is a better card to craft early on, because you can just use it in more decks. As good as Haunted Manor is, you can only use it in Hlaalu, so if you don't want to play Hlaalu, that's a lot of gems sunk in. This is actually a fairly standard token list. Weirdly enough, we're not missing a whole lot, except for Cloud Resolutionist again. We are missing Marked Man, which we will replace with the Solitude Stalwart. We have quite a strong early game here with the Raw Firebrands, the Skulks to pull them. The standard 2-drops with both Pruma, Profiteer, and Cleric of Kind. You usually have to choose, but in 75 cards we get to have both. We added Imprisons, which is not something you always see because we do have to run Imperial Reinforcements due to a lack of 4s. Quite a bit of draw. Priest of the 8, Crusader's Assault, East March Crusader, Ash Berserker again, this card is insane. We have Thieves Guild Shadowfoot because the 3s are not super strong in this, and it also helps skip runes if you're dealing with Prophecy decks. We do have Tears from the story mission, and Kwama Queen, as well as the One Haunted Manor from the Precon. I believe that is it from the Precon. And yeah, that's about it. The Golden Saints are something you could potentially replace. I wanted a little bit more of a dedicated finisher because my 3s weren't as strong in this deck, as you're missing stuff like Pit Lion, although Morthal Executioner is a really solid card that is essentially a replacement to Pit Lion. But yeah, tokens are generally about board control. So what you want to do with board control in terms of tokens is apply early creatures, stuff like the Scouting Patrol, the Solitude Stalwart, Cleric of Kind, 5th Legion Trainer, and use that to make it so your opponent is always reacting. That's one of the things that tokens does as good as any other deck in the history of this game, is to force your opponent to always be reactive. When every small threat that you're putting out as a token deck can become a larger threat, or can even just do chip damage in the case of something like Scouting Patrol or Imperial Reinforcements, it makes your opponent divert their game plan. And while they're doing that, you're not only building a board, you're also dealing damage, and you're probably drawing cards too, because you have Crusader colors. In the very end, Divine Fervor is one of the best finishers in the game. Divine Fervor just kind of does it. Regardless of what your deck is, Divine Fervor is going to be a really solid finisher, but in token decks especially. And then you have enough utility in the form of card draw and stuff like Imprison, Cleric of Kind, Bruma Profiteer, Ambitious Hireling, just weird little cards that can kind of unsuspectingly swing a game in your favor, do something that your opponent may not be ready for. So that's what we're going with for tokens. It is a really, really good deck. This is probably one I would recommend the most. It's a really, really good deck for learning the importance of field lane and learning the importance of when to know when to attack. Because you can't just play tokens like an aggro. You can, because it's a good deck, but if you want to optimize tokens, you can't just play it like an aggro deck. It is a board-based aggro deck, not just a face deck. So it's one of the ones that really, really takes a bit to get used to, but once you do, it's one of the most fun archetypes to play. So here are our non-budget options. None of these are really actually auto-includes, aside from the Marked Man, Pitline, Cloudrest Illusionist. The other ones are sort of, you have the choice. I think Anasi should be an auto-include, but it isn't at the moment for other people. Mortong Aspirant and Mournhold Trader are interesting if you want to show up the early game. Rift Thane is a pretty good offensive 2-drop, but it's a little bit inconsistent, so you don't absolutely need Rift Thane. That's probably lowest on this list. Ulfric's Housecarl is just insane in terms of keeping the pressure, but you do have Ash Berserker, so you don't need all of the draw. We kind of have enough. And then, of course, Nasi, Cloudrest Illusionist, Pit Lion, and Marked Man just kind of do everything you want to be doing for tokens. And Nasi's just an insanely powerful card, so I just play Nasi regardless. But those are the cards to look at as you're expanding your collection, but I think the deck functions fairly strongly without them. So I think that's going to do it for me today. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I appreciate anybody who stuck through the budget series first couple of episodes. I think this format is going to be a little bit more engaging and a little bit more informative moving forward. If you guys don't like it, just let me know. Again, if you have anything to say about my content, just let me know through PMs, through Discord. You can send me a mail if you find out where I live, although that's kind of weird. I really don't care. I'm looking to improve, and if you guys have things that you enjoy or don't enjoy, just let me know. I may not always respond because I suck, but I do always read everything. So thank you very much again for watching. I will see you guys next time with, hopefully, if I can come up with a good one, a budget control deck.